worked out really well for me.
Hello. Hello, good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Before we start, just a few housekeeping. We are taping this so we can show it for alumni on our website, so please turn off your cell phones, silence your cell phones so it doesn't interfere with our recording. And if you have to get up to use the restroom, please use that back door entrance, because that one makes a little bit of noise. Welcome to the Meet the CEO for Washington, D.C. My name is Erica Arroyo. I'm the Associate Vice President of Engagement at the University of Miami. I've been there for 13 years, and I'm a double cane. Happy to be here. Yes! Happy to be here with Wonderful Canes, friends, family, thank you all for joining us. This is the third stop in our 3-city tour. We've been to New York. We had Lear Cohen, who's our YouTube's global head of music, hosted us in his Google office a few weeks ago. Last week we were in San Francisco. Guillermo de Rancebal, he's our alumnus from the School of Business, and he has his own wine. It's a top 5 on the Wine Spectator, so you might want to check it out. So we're excited to highlight another notable alumnus, and our moderator is also notable in her own right. And I'll introduce them in just a bit, but wanted to make sure that I let you guys know there's an active cane community here in your backyard. Jennifer Del Toro, if you can stand up. And she's in the back, yes? She's our president of the DC Canes and is looking for volunteers to get involved, so please feel free to connect with her. We have over 185,000 living alumni across the U.S., and right here in DC in the local surrounding areas we have about 4,400, so we have a lot of active Canes here. And a couple of things that you can do to get involved. I'm just going to name a few to keep in mind. Of course, get involved with the Canes community, get engaged, be informed ambassadors, give back when you can financially, hire a cane, offer internships and jobs to our future Canes. That's always very much appreciated. Volunteer. We have lots of alumni boards. We have a few of our President's Council members here this evening. There's lots of opportunities. Parents' Council is another way. Mentor. And then also download our alumni app. We have an alumni app. If you go to the Google Store online, Apple Play, you can download our app, and it has essentially everything you need to know about how to stay connected with us. So we're thrilled to feature this evening Johnny Taylor. Johnny C. Taylor Jr. is a Bachelor of Science Communication grad from the University of Miami in 1989. He is a UM trustee, and he is President and Chief Executive Officer of the Society for Human Resource Management, the world's largest professional society serving HR and business leaders across the globe. The Society impacts millions of individuals and families through its mission to create better workplaces for a better world. Taylor's career includes senior and chief executive roles at IAC, Interactive Corp., Viacom's Paramount Pictures, and Blockbuster Entertainment Group, McGuire Woods LLC, Compass Group USA, and the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. In addition, we're delighted to have with Johnny a great cane as well, Maribel Wadsworth. Bachelor of Science and Communication in 1993. Maribel is president of USA Today Network and publisher of USA Today. In her role, she oversees the company's $1 billion consumer business. Prior to this role, she was with the companies as a chief transformation officer and chief strategy officer. She's a veteran journalist with 20 years of experience, and she has held a variety of roles at community news organizations, from reporter to managing editor, before transitioning to the business side of media in 2009. And I have to just note that today is her husband's birthday. Chris, where's Chris? Back here. So we just say happy birthday to Chris, who's an alumnus as well of the university. Thank you for spending your birthday with fellow Canes. And Maribel's actually, and Chris, are both parents of an incoming freshman. So we're very excited. It's all in the family. With that, I want to introduce our two main speakers, Johnny Taylor and Maribel Wadsworth, to take the stage. Thank you.
This mic is
on. Okay, well, what a wonderful crowd we have this evening. It's wonderful to be in a room full of Canes.
Yes. One whose mic doesn't work.
Oh dear, we need to. We'll work on that. Well, we're looking forward to a conversation this evening, and it'll be, I think, a great conversation. Johnny, I know, has so much to share with all of us this evening, but we hope certainly that you also partake. So while I'm going to kick things off and get some questions answered, I hope you're thinking about what questions you might want to ask as well, and please do jump in. So first,
okay.
The Society of Human Resource Management, SHRM. We love our acronyms.
Yes, we do.
You are in a position of considerable influence. You influence policy on the Hill. You offer best practices and guidance and advice to boards and C-suites all over the country. Your membership is obviously tremendously vast. Tell us a little bit more about what that actually means and what SHRM is really focused on and where you want to really make your mark.
Well, first of all, thank you all. Thank you for coming out tonight. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be recognized and allowed to sit on the stage to represent my institution, University of Miami. I'm a true, proud Cane. Bleed it, orange and green, as we say.
We paired up here.
We paired up. I even bought me a fancy orange tie.
That wasn't even on purpose.
That's right. That's right. We did it together, right? But so the Society for Human Resource Management, it's called SHRM, and we're the world's largest HR association. We have 310 now thousand members across the globe. We're headquartered here in the DMV, technically in Alexandria, Virginia, but we have offices. We have 3 offices in India. We have an office in China. We have an office in Dubai. So we are a global organization. And the best way, sort of the elevator speech, the way to describe what we do is think about what the American Bar Association does for lawyers. They represent the legal profession, or the American Medical Association for physicians. The doctors, and we would therefore be that for HR professionals. And the distinction is HR is not just American or not, it's a global profession, and therefore our members, you can find them in one of 165 countries across the globe, and so it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. We're 71 years old. I became the CEO last year, coming from industry and a brief stint in the nonprofit space. And it's to answer your question, it's important for me to say for 70 years we were focused on serving the profession. Individuals who identified themselves as HR professionals. And as you know, you can come in and out. I'm trained as a lawyer. I spent the beginning of my career in major law firms, and then as general counsel in a domestic company, international. I was in the UK for 2 years, FTSE 100 company as its general counsel, and then came back to the States. But I say that to say, when they first approached me, I thought, wow, it's great to represent the HR profession, but I think there's so much bigger of a remit for this profession. Because if you think, you spend most of the time that you're awake at work. And so this should be a lot more than just about HR professionals. It should be generally about people in the workplace. So over the last year, my first now year and a half, but first year in this role, what we've said is we're going to focus not only on workers, but we're going to really focus on work and the workplace. So what we say is work, workers, and the workplace. And a lot less specifically focused on employees of HR professionals, but of all of the 115 million people who work in the companies our members service every day. So that's our new commitment. Our new tagline is better workplaces, better world. And so it's a much larger and more important responsibility that we have, particularly in light of some dynamics that we'll talk about, from Me Too to larger diversity and inclusion matters, to pay inequities, some based on gender, some race, some national origin, ageism, which is a real issue now. And for those of you who are young in the room, let me tell you, 40 means you're old, according to the federal government. And that's when you begin to see it creep into and for those of you who are in your 20s now, 40 happens quickly. Trust me. You wake up one day, right, and you're like, oh my God, I'm old. And employers will tell you that. I was looking at my man Stu here, who is sharp as he graduated from Miami in 1964. Let's give it out, right? Shout out to him. 1964. But I say that, long answer to say, that's what we do.
Still in the workplace.
And still in the workplace. All righty, my man. I gotta know you.
You know, what it recalls for me is this trend that I have seen more and more, including at Gannett, our parent company, where we've moved away from HR and we've put the people squarely in the middle of it. And are you seeing that more broadly, the transition to chief people officers instead of, say, CHROs?
Listen, I don't mean to make light of it, but it's a little bit of potato. I mean, physicians, practitioners, lawyers, attorneys. I mean, you can kind of call things whatever you want. What we think is more important is that the practice actually focus on people and not HR professionals. That's the differentiator, is that we put people at the center of it. And frankly, because of sort of macroeconomic realities in the US, we now, as you all know, have 7.5 million open jobs and 6 million people looking for them. We have not only a skills gap, but we have a human being gap, right? And so that's real. Millennials, and I say this all the time, God bless you all, but you don't have children. You have pets. And so the reality is we employers are in trouble because we need bodies to do our jobs to help us grow. So there's a lot of dynamics at play that have made people the center of all organizations. There was a time when I was a labor and employment lawyer when his CEOs would stand up and say people are our most important asset. But what do you expect them to say, right? When they're talking to a group of employees, but people are our most important asset. Fast forward, they go back in the room and start talking about their capital and their buildings and their equipment, and it was never about people. What we're seeing now, because of the talent shortage, the skills shortage, because of the information era, knowledge-based economy that we're in now, is it really is about people. So it's more than lip service.
That's right.
To answer your question, though, it's people call it what it is. We believe HR is a profession just like my former profession as a lawyer, just like journalism, my first profession. I'm a graduate of the School of Communications, by the way, and I have a master's in communications. Yes, SOC in the room, right? So less about what they say and what they call themselves and more about what they do. We are people focused.
Yeah, I want to pull on that thread, though, this issue of the work skills gap that we have, and there's a lot of talk about it, but what are you seeing that's effective in addressing this issue? Are there public-private partnerships? What are the solutions that you're seeing out there?
So they fall into three buckets. I hope I'm okay. So they fall into three buckets. One is literally changing the way people think of education. You're no longer, you go to college, go to high school, go to college, you graduate, maybe you go get a professional or graduate degree, and then you're done with your education. It's lifelong learning. And so we literally are saying you have to rethink education. You will have to retool now every 5, 7, 10 years at the latest if you're going to remain viable and in the workplace. So it's rethinking education, right? The second thing that we're doing is rethinking the pools from which we fish, or the ponds from which we fish. We have always gone to colleges to get bright, young graduates, and the reality is we've got to figure out how to tap into all generations. This is the first time in the American history that we have had 5 generations in the workplace at one time. And long gone are the days where we think about a Walmart and you say they hire older workers, but those older workers are just greeters, the Walmart greeter guy. No, we're actually trying to teach 60-year-olds new coding language because we need them in the workplace. So there are real specific initiatives around retooling everyone, not just counting on the 18 to 24-year-olds who are coming out of high school and going right into the workplace or college. The third thing that we're doing is really focusing on culture within organizations. That is a big, big differentiator, and you and I talked about that. I'd love for you to it's not just, it used to feel soft to talk about culture. What's culture? Can you do it? Do we hit our numbers? And the reality now is we're understanding that people work, especially in this job market, because they want to. And they work for you because they want to. So if we can't give them more than just a check, we have to give them a culture that makes them want to come. We have to establish purpose and be clear about what your purpose is and what your culture is. We can't keep talent. So those are the three things that you see a lot of. lifelong learning. I mean, whatever computer language you know right now, trust me, it'll be outdated 5 or 7 years from now. You know, and so you've got to retrain and reskill constantly. And then this real focus on culture is like you can't underscore how important culture is.
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, we were talking earlier about just the starting, the anchor point being purpose. And from there, what are the values, what are the behaviors that really underpin an organization and you know, ultimately spell its culture? I think it's so important. So let's get underneath that a little bit more. You spoke about the multi-generational. It's one of two of the sort of big transformational trends that I see in workplaces today. But the fact that you have you know, baby boomers and you have millennials in the workforce and often very different culturally, different expectations. You know, it's very different kinds of conversations about what's important and what matters and things like that. So say a little bit more about the kinds of challenges you're seeing employers have and where they have had pitfalls. And what's your best advice for managing? And I think we should turn the conversation around a little bit too and talk about what our responsibilities are in these various roles and generations that we have.
Yeah, it's and by the way, it's important for us to now start talking about Generation Z. Everyone's talking about millennials, and the fact of the matter is a generation, or some call it the Z generation, but they were born in 1997, some say as late as 2000, but at the end of the day, since it's 2019, many of them are coming into the workplace now, the ones who didn't go on to college or pursue advanced education. So we are now dealing with not just millennials, but now the Z generation. And what we're finding is a couple of things that, because they are distinctly different in their experiences, think about, they're digital natives. I mean, we take it kind of lightly, but the fact of the matter is, I'm just going to leave this here so it doesn't fall off. The fact of the matter is, those of us who are in our 40s, 50s, by the way, we didn't have cell phones. They were not ubiquitous. You didn't have them. You kept a quarter on you just in case you needed to stop and call someone, right? And we memorized pagers, phone number, pagers. Don't even try it. I mean, see, you may have had a pager. No. Stu said, listen, we didn't even have that. What are you talking about? But the fact of the matter is, you know, they just think very differently. I literally talked to one of our newer employees the other day, and they don't wear watches. Something as simple as a watch, because it's all on this PDA, this device. You don't need one, and therefore they're typically late. No, but I'll tell you a little bit about that too. God bless her. Where's my intern here? Could I tell you I gotta tell you, I'm gonna put her on the spot. Stand up, young lady, Old Dominion University. I'm gonna give her for a moment, shout her out. Yesterday's her first day in the office. I meet with all of the interns. She stands, I'm in the office, 8:30. I've served them all breakfast, hot breakfast, I come in, I begin my speech, and 20 minutes into my welcoming speech, in comes this young lady. It's like, oh, really? Really? So you gonna roll up in my office on the first day, 20 minutes late. God bless her, she's like turning totally purple over there because she's black like me, so we don't turn red. You can cut that, but but I have fun with it is what it is. But if you can't laugh at yourself, then what? But the fact of the matter is there are some significant differences, right? Seriously. And what we're trying to do from an employment perspective is to figure out how to reconcile all of those differences. Our older workers, for example, are looking for financial security in their retirement. So things like pension plans matter to them, 401k match. The younger employees, particularly millennials who are coming out of college, are saying, I'm fighting student loans. Forget the 401k match, figure out how to pay off my student loans for me. So we have to reconcile what have been sort of one-size-fits-all benefits. What is important to one part of this population may not necessarily be important to the other. The idea, they have grown up, diversity is a given for the last two generations, Generation Z and millennials, but I'll tell you something. Inclusion isn't necessarily. people think that because you have diversity, you have inclusion. The fact of the matter is diversity is easier to achieve than inclusion. And we are now seeing that. In fact, it's much more difficult to manage a diverse workforce than not. And so we're now having to retool, rethink about those things. And I'm not just talking about black, white, national origin, gender. I'm talking gender orientation. I mean, all sorts of things have changed. And we're trying to figure out how to reconcile that in a workplace. Real anecdote, I had one employee who was going through a gender transformation, right? And said when she came back to work, the pronoun was supposed to be she, and in the interim wanted her colleagues to refer to as her. I had an older employee say, never, won't happen, I won't speak to her then. Like, I mean, it's just like, really, imagine that world that we in the workforce have to figure out how to make all of these people feel included. So we've got diversity, they all work there, but how do we make them feel included?
So how did you address that issue?
It was tough. I mean, that's really what I can tell you. It was far, because you're not just dealing with an old mindset, there are religious sort of values that come into play. There are geographic differences with accepting this. How did we ultimately do it? We said, listen, if in fact this is going to take you somewhere, we said, listen, we have got to accept everyone in this workplace. And frankly, you don't have to talk to this person, so find something you're comfortable with. I got an idea, call them by their name. So if you don't feel comfortable calling what you think is a he or she, then whatever the name is and they tell you that's their name, that's what you call them. And now we can avoid that. So we try to side, because we had a huge debate. She said, you want me to accept them, why can't they accept me? Fair, interesting question. And we said, well, here's the deal. Yeah. Call them by their first name and that's it. Mr. Don't even say Mr. or Ms., just say the first name and call us a day. Those are the sorts of things. I'm telling you, it's a complicated workforce right now. Let me just tell you. And the inclusion part is the most difficult to manage. One that we deal with every day. Political diversity. We will welcome, and we saw this in the workplace. People would wear their Hope shirts for Obama, but an employee comes in wearing a Trump shirt and they're like, oh, that's horrible. It's like, no, they felt that when you wore that shirt, it was horrible. And we dare not tell someone they can't wear that to a company picnic or whatever. So diversity is not, I accept diversity as long as I agree with you. Right, as long as you see the world the way I see it. It is more complicated, and that is why this topic, and it's bigger than just race and gender anymore. It's really diversity with a big D.
It is so big, but to that point, it's, diversity, almost we've evolved to the place where diversity is the check the box. It's the table stakes. We all get it. I can't imagine there's anyone here today that doesn't understand the value, the business imperative of diversity. But we don't realize the full potential unless there's truly inclusion. And so how do we create environments in which people can truly bring their authentic selves to work?
I knew she was going to do that. That is like the phrase that I absolutely hate. Authentic self. I'm like, no, because no, it sounds good, but I don't want every employee bringing their authentic self to work. What the hell does that mean? I can't manage. There have to be some sort of guardrails, some rules, because if you took that literally to its illogical end, stop and think about what that means. I mean, right? You talked about, there's appropriateness. And there's respect, and there's dignity, and that means we have some guardrails. You can't really just bring your true self to work. And so we're trying to manage through, and some of us in HR, and we've now evolved to understand words matter. And so you can't just say things like bring your authentic self to work. You can't, and you and I've talked about this, we have people who say, well, that means I can wear what I want. No. Right. No. And tell me, I want you to share about that story with your son.
I know. We were talking the other day. I had a circumstance where we'd had a recently acquired company, small startup, you can imagine, in that millennial space, and really creative young guys who founded the company, and they always wore the same outfit, black jeans, black t-shirt, and black ball cap, no matter where they were. And we had a board of directors, big shareholder meeting last year, and in they waltz in their standard uniform. And nobody really reacted necessarily, and everybody shook hands with them, and it was all fine. But then there had been an incident around some inappropriate behavior, and so I was having a conversation with the founder, and I said, and here's an example. You should be yourself, and part of it is your creativity, but we also have to be appropriate to our environment. I said, Mark Zuckerberg wears a t-shirt and jeans to work every day, but when he showed up on Capitol Hill, he wore a suit.
That's right.
And I don't think those two things are in conflict with each other. And so, those are the kinds of conversations that we're having on a daily basis.
Daily basis. And I mean, I cannot underestimate, and it's partly because words matter and we've just been very loose with them. If you tell someone, like, you just can't roll out of your bed and roll up in here. That's not how this works. Depending upon the nature of the meeting, if it's a sales meeting, if it's a board meeting, there are clothes that I wear out to a nightclub and there are clothes that I'm gonna wear to work. And just having those conversations is what we're up against. And then you merge that with a generation that really, you're suited up every day, and not just with a shirt and tie, but it's a white shirt and a tie and a blue suit, a gray suit, or a black suit. They just had rules, and trying to make all of that work mesh is really a lot. And the issue is we can't do without any of these generations. I pointed out, we have a talent, there's a shortage. There's no other way to describe it. And as for all of AI, we're going to talk about it, and machine learning and all of that. The reality is we're going to need human beings, and we're going to need a lot of them as we continue to move into this information/augmented fourth industrial revolution kind of world. We're going to need human beings, and they're different now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sticking on this theme of sort of thorny workplace issues, one of the obviously biggest and most impactful things that we've seen, not in a good way, has been the Me Too movement. Perhaps in a good way, because we're finally bringing transparency to a problem that's been pervasive in workplaces and society for a really long time. Coming in here today, my husband knows he was having to hear me on the phone on my way in, dealing with a young female reporter who was basically, accosted in a sexual way by a source she was interviewing. These are things you can't even begin to imagine happen in 2019, but these are the things that we deal with all the time. But as we talked about earlier last week, there are many sides to all of these issues, and there's nuance that we need to make sure we're talking about also. So tell me about how that's playing out.
Wow. First, while the Me Too is largely a woman problem, it's not exclusively one. The fact of the matter is roughly 17 to 18% of EEOC cases, sexual harassment cases, are brought by men. And so you absolutely can be sexually harassed by a woman as a man in the workplace, or frankly, man to man, woman to man, man to woman. It's still largely a female issue, a woman issue, but it's not exclusively one. And we're seeing the uptick because as women take on, if the argument is many of these are instances of people abusing power, then as more women get in power positions, they may or may not continue to abuse them. And so we are seeing some of that play itself out in the workplace. A couple of ways that we try to deal with it, and it starts with the naivete of believing that you can legislate your way out of this. We finally have put it down. We've had laws on the books forever, and that didn't solve for it. And it's not one party or the other. That's the other thing. You hear people go down, well, it's worse now. Well, no, let me take you back. There was Clarence Thomas. There was Bill Clinton. We've been here before. So every time we thought we'd gotten past it, no party has a lock on it. It occurs. I was mentioning to you, December, I guess it was January of last year, I was invited out to the state of California to talk with them because they'd had a spate of sexual harassment allegations. 3 of them male assemblymen, in this case, had been accused of sexual harassment. And one of the most vocal members of the Time's Up movement, and I'll call it movement for purposes right now, was Assemblywoman Garcia. So I'm meeting with them, and she's like, they should step away immediately from their jobs. And I'm trying to make the case that as a lawyer, forget the man in me, I'm just a lawyer saying, don't we need to go through a process and make sure that just the accusation doesn't immediately ruin someone's career? No. The irony is 3 weeks later, 3 men accused her of sexual harassment. She didn't step down. And so, you know me, phone call, to say, let's call you on it now. The fact of the matter is we have got to get to the point where we teach empathy, dignity, treating, and I say, I have a daughter, a mother, 2 sisters. So sexual harassment isn't just a woman's problem, it's my problem. I don't want my daughter to grow up in an environment where she's subjected to that. But news alert, you're a woman CEO. Men work for you. If you didn't have and live if you didn't have the right values, the right culture, you could be just as likely as I am to engage in this conduct. So this is an it's actually a global problem. It's not an American problem, it's a global problem, and we're addressing it as such.
I think that's right, but even as we're in the middle of it, and we stumble a lot. And as we're stumbling to figure things out and what's the right path and how do we address these issues, I know I'm experiencing this. I suspect there are many of you in the room who have heard something along the lines of, well, I'm just not going to do any dinners with my female colleagues. I'm not going to take them to lunch. I'm not going to take one-on-one meetings. If that's the stance, how are people, we know, we've been doing this a long time, we employ a lot of people, that one-on-one time is incredibly valuable to building the relationship, to giving you the opportunities for advancement, to finding the sponsors that are going to boost your career.
Yes.
How do we get past that?
It is horrible. So Lean In just released its survey results about a week and a half ago and found that 60% of men have said they've limited their after-work interactions with women as a result of Me Too. This is a horrible consequence, unacceptable, by the way, so there's no part of us that thinks that makes sense, but it's something that we anticipated. We spoke early about the fact that people could overcorrect the other way. So human resources, our profession, talking about a better workplace and a better world, we've taken it upon ourselves to have real, critical, crucial conversations with men. I find myself in meetings with men CEOs who say that. I mean, they're very honest, and they will say to you, listen, I'm an evolved good guy. I have a daughter, I have a wife, etc. But the reality is I'm trying to manage the risk of my reputation. I have to do this. And we are talking them off of that. And that takes an active conversation, and we're giving them tools to understand why that can't be the answer, that you just stop working with women or limit their career opportunities, that it's just wrong. I use the word empathy. I spend a lot of time, I was just in a meeting with the 250 top business people, and some of them were women and increasingly more women like yourself, but sitting in a room, and the men went off to the side and the women went off to another side, and that buzz came up. People were honestly saying, no recording, no nothing, saying, Johnny, I don't even hire female secretaries anymore or executive assistants. I will only hire a man because I don't have to worry about those things. And I said, that's just dumb. And we, really, and we have to hold each other accountable as men. What you're saying is that my daughter can get the best education in the world and 14, 15 years from now finish college, and you're not going to give her an opportunity because you're afraid of some theoretical, that's ridiculous. And so men have to own that as well. We've got to speak up and call each other out when we see it and help them understand how to listen, you can have dinner with the woman and not try and hit on her, my God. There's a big difference there between that. And that's what we've got to do, and not let the bad players set the tone for how we sort of get together and manage together in the workplace. No, so important, but I see that danger. Oh, you see it, and they're doing it. That's what's scary. At least, for what it was worth, I was at least glad they were honest and talked about it. Because it could be that they just did it, and that's what the LinkedIn study told us. Our research at SHRM told us we were at about 52% of men. LinkedIn said, and I think you're going to see the number get every time there, it will give some man in his head the justification to say, that's why I'm not going to make that opportunity. By the way, ladies, no part of me is saying that's good. No part of me is saying that's acceptable. What I'm trying to say is that's the reality. And what we've got to do as a profession, the HR profession in particular, is address that reality.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I want to make a little bit of a hard right here. These are big issues, big issues we could spend a lot of time on, but we've got a room full of canes, which is wonderful.
Yes.
And no doubt, some of them are thinking about their first career, some of them are thinking about transitioning careers. So what advice do you have for our fellow canes as they think about the choices in the workplace and how they should position themselves for today's workplace?
So what we know in what we're calling the augmented era, the fourth industrial revolution, whatever you want to call it, is that we are looking for really three characteristics, three skills. And the skills, surprisingly, aren't going to be know this coding language or know this or that. Surprisingly, what we're looking for in the workplace are creativity. You have to be able to evidence in the workplace. And by the way, this matters not what your age is. When you come in, I want to know, are you creative? Are you adaptable? And are you agile? Those are the three things that employers consistently, creativity, adaptability, and agility. If you can evidence that during a conversation, during your interview, you're going to be way ahead of the other people. Because what we know is that what you know right now coming out of school will be old 3, 5, 7 years from now. It's dated. The law is not what it was when I graduated from law school. It's changed significantly. So, you know, it's nice to know the state of journalism right now or the business, but what you really have to do is prove to me that you are agile enough, adaptable enough, and creative enough to respond to what the world's going to be in 10 years. And the fact of the matter is we don't know what it's going to be in 10 years. That's what you've got to do. The other thing is we really look for smart and curious people. So those three things, I would cap it off with smart and curious. What we now know is that smart doesn't necessarily mean a college degree, the attainment of a college degree. Now, I am not suggesting that any of you should not go to the University of Miami or that you should okay, he said I didn't have to go to college. No, you need to go to college because it also is a proxy for some other things. But I will tell you what you've got to evidence to us is that you're smart. And smart manifests itself in a lot of ways, including your ability to solve a problem for me.
Huge.
That's where creativity comes in.
That's huge.
I don't care that you have a 3.8 or 3.9. That could mean that you just test well, that you have great memory, but it doesn't mean you can solve a problem for me. So as you're coming into the workplace, say to me, if I'm going to pay you $100,000, I think of you, and I hate to say this, but it's the way I, in a very crass way, think of talent that come into my office. You're the plumber, and the question is, are you worth $100,000? I'm hiring you into my house to do something for me. And if you can solve a problem for me, I may give you $200,000. But if it's just you're impressed with I'm a summa cum laude graduate of the University of Miami and I have an MBA, I'm like, whatever, you and 40 million other people, right? So you really do have to push really hard on proving that you're smart, but that you're also curious. So I put those two together. All of us have met people who are really smart about one thing, but don't care about anything else. That's not a good mix. We want people who are really curious about the world. They're looking around the corner. They want to know what the future holds because they want to be a part of it. So smart and curious, if you can prove to any interviewer, again, no matter your age, if you're a new hire, mid-career, an older worker coming back into the workplace, prove to me that you're smart and curious, and prove to me that you're creative, agile, and adaptable. You can get almost any job. Weave that into it, and that's not just Johnny Taylor's opinion. We have about 20 or so PhDs, statisticians, researchers, IO psychologists on staff at the SHRM headquarters, and we are talking to employers every day, and this is what they are telling us.
I can tell you big old underscore on that because
From a CEO, right?
As an employer, I will tell you curious. I was waiting for you to get to the word curious because that is probably the number one thing that I look for in the people that I'm going to hire and people on my team, because I don't want people who are just going to go do things. I want them to be curious about peeking around corners and really understanding what comes next and frankly, understanding that some things don't work as well as they could and they could be improved upon, and so then come with that solution.
That's right.
My happiest moments are when people come and tell me, look, this is a problem, and the next sentence is, but this is how I think we take care of it. And that's an enormous enormous thing, and you know, some people just innately have that, and
That's right.
it's a really big deal. So curious and problem solvers, huge.
And figure out when you're interviewing, let me just tell you some tips on interviewing. Don't wait for the interviewer to ask you a question and then you just answer it. I mean, let them open it, obviously. Don't take it over. Don't take over the whole conversation. But you have to reveal your curiosity, because in their 8 questions that they're going to ask you, right, they may not get to it. You have to show them that you are thinking, you know, it's just really important. One other thing is, and I think you'd agree with this, because of the internet, you can go in and know everything about the person who you're interviewing with. It's creepy, right? When the person's sitting across to you, it's like, so tell me, how's your daughter Taylor? I'm like, how the hell do you have a daughter? What does that have to do with anything? Right? But so don't get so comfortable. Seriously, that is a mistake. I think because of the availability of information about people out there, there's nothing, and I truly mean this, it's creepy to get like that. Like, listen, talk about something else. Don't talk about my family and all that kind of stuff, because we don't know each other like that, and we won't know each other if you continue to go down this path. It's a serious thing. Don't get so comfortable. Right?
Yeah.
Is that fair?
No, I do. I definitely experience that some. I mean, you and I have written a lot, and so there's a lot out there, and you know, there can be some lines crossed in these conversations.
Yes.
But I do appreciate it. You know, by the time a job candidate gets to me, I'm not talking about competency with that person, because I expect my team has already gotten that far. So my conversations are about culture. So one of the things I love in those interviews is the tables turned, and to see people asking me questions and what kind of questions they're going to ask. And hopefully they're asking questions about what kind of place this is to work and things like that are so important, because look, at the end of the day, we all want to work for good people and people who share our values, and so you want to tease that out. That's really important for you to know. But I'm looking at it because I want to know that you're going to be a good cultural fit. So those things I think are super important.
And you should be asking us a lot about culture. You can't underscore. If an organization can't describe what it means to work there, and by the way, I don't really believe in all that glass door stuff and everything, because the people who go there and complain are the people who will complain it, right? You know, like very rarely does a great employee think, oh, I should go on and tell Glassdoor that this is a wonderful place. No, they go complain, or they were great until I fired them, and then they go complain about me, right? What you got to do is really do your homework. I talk about courting. In the courtship process, we in HR are courting you. We want you to come work for us. You've got to dig deep. Like, you really need to understand. So what do you look like in the morning? What's a bad day for you? Because none of us are perfect, right? In the workplace. I love people who say, Johnny, and my wonderful, wonderful colleague here who runs our executive office operations, Chris Lopez, by the way, is going to finish his MBA from Miami in December. Woo, 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 woo. But Christopher, you know, he will tell people when they're coming in to meet with me, and he says, let me tell you, on a good day, he's good. On a bad day, it's a different Johnny. Let me tell you who it is. And people should know that, because we're all human beings, right? And understanding how to manage. You need to ask yourself, what does it mean to work at this place? Yes. And then don't get so hooked on, I want to work at Apple. Maybe there is no cultural alignment with the things that,
hugely important,
right?
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, I'm going to ask you one last question, because I want to leave time for these folks to also ask you some questions. Back to the U.
Yes.
Why the U?
Oh. Orange is just a pretty color. Let me tell you. So, you know, and some of these are going to be 3 quick answers. And some of them are going to be a little superficial, but they're honest. They're the things that matter to me. It's a beautiful campus. Let me just tell you, they spend a lot of money keeping it beautiful, and I don't know about you, but it's a lot easier to learn sitting next to the lake with beautiful grass and trees and blah, blah, blah. Okay, the dorm rooms, the new ones, I was just talking about the other day. I had longed for the day that I could take my daughter back to Miami, like you were taking your child back to Miami, to walk into the dorm building that I lived in, but I heard they're taking them down, right? Hecht Residential College, right?
Yeah.
But it is truly not.
No, it's there.
But they're gonna take them down. I'm told.
My son will be the last class. To,
yes,
to live in Hecht. I think that's good for him, though. That's good.
Right. She said they just
The
redid the
lobby's
lobby.
nicely updated, yes. Yes, only.
Only the lobby.
But they redid it.
But they redid it. But seriously, aesthetics matter. It's a safe. You're nestled in Coral Gables. It's a beautiful campus, and the university spends significant dollars to make sure that it's beautiful because you want a wonderful environment in which to study. That's number one. Two is the size. I think there are some great schools that are 50, 60,000 students, but being able to work in this environment with 13,000 or so people, you get to know each other, but not too much, you know, so I didn't want a 500-person class, like I wanted a larger, so it's that middle size. And then the third area that really mattered to me was this interesting mix of really teaching you how to think. You know, more than, I get a little bit of it from law school. People say you go to law school not to learn how to practice, but how to think like a lawyer. Miami is in some ways on the undergraduate level very good at that, teaching you how to solve problems, to think through, make the world a better place, while also mastering specific skills if you're in the School of Communication, School of Nursing, School of Business, what have you. So it's that interesting mix of, you know, real life experience. You leave, you'll be able to do something. I'm a trustee, so I was at a trustee meeting, and they brought a couple of students in from the marketing program, and they showcased that they are actually working for real life clients in South Florida right now in the School of Business. So when they leave, they're actually going to be career and business ready, not just with a degree in hand. So that merger of practical plus really critical thinking, honing your critical thinking skills, is something that you don't see in a lot of places. And so I think those three things, and that was true of Miami a decade or so ago when I was there. Shut up, Chris. I said, or so.
He didn't say he was a mathematician.
Right. It's my Hollywood age. But it's true now. They've always really taken care of the physical plan and made it a wonderful place. Size has always been one of the jewels, I think, of Miami. And just that faculty that when you leave here, you'll be able to do something. But I think you'll be a better person because you can actually solve problems, the world's most vexing problems.
Yeah, that's great. Well,
Do you say the same thing?
I would say all of those things. I have the added benefit that it was a UM professor who introduced me to my husband.
Oh.
So, yes.
Well, I had a UM professor speak. I was also we were both in the School of Communication, and she, I know your husband is as well, right?
Yes.
And she was, people often say, how'd you end up where you are? Well, Alice Clement was a professor of journalism. She covered the legal beat, so she had a law degree, and she was also a journalist. And she worked at Knight Ridder, what was then Miami Herald, Knight Ridder, and I really just got that bug. And again, that curiosity that she piqued in that educational process was just simply amazing. So I can't say enough. If my daughter were 10 years older, right now she'd be at Miami. I've kind of already told her, right? Know where you're going, but my money's going to Miami, so figure it out, right? Work it out. Some kid's going to use your tuition, and you're going to have to figure it out if you go somewhere else.
I've got one starting. We're happy to do a little transfer here. You can send the money. It's fine.
So no, it's a wonderful thing. You'll enjoy it quite a bit.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place. Okay, so let's open it up for at least a few questions from the.
Yes, ma'am.
We've got Mike right here. Mike.
I heard a lot about millennials and baby boomers. What about the Gen Xers in the workplace?
What about the
Gen Xers in the room?
Thank you for that question.
So here's an interesting little tidbit, and my numbers might be a little bit off, but we often say the millennial generation is the largest, they make up the largest percentage of the workplace. But if you really take baby boomers and our generation, the two of them together are larger than the millennial population. And that's where senior management comes from. You know, millennials are interesting and they're very smart and creative and all that good stuff, but they just haven't lived enough life to really manage really complex and complicated organizations. So we, frankly, at the risk of understanding that this entire thing could topple if we don't invest in that generation in the middle as well as we spend a lot of time, because that is our bread and butter, At the end of the day, I need people who've been through some things. I say just a little gray in your sideburns. I kind of want to know that you've had some sleepless nights, that you've confronted some situations, and this isn't your first time seeing this situation, and that's the value. So what we have to do is find a way to balance both. And I think what we're getting to in school, K through 12 system, they often refer to things as these IDPs, these individualized plans, or whatever the acronym. Well, we call them individualized development plans even in the corporate workforce. And so increasingly, the most cutting edge employers are sitting down with you on your way in, and they're saying, tell me what matters to you. I want to know, do you have $50,000 in student loan? If my head of government affairs can get the government to think about this, we're going to get to the point where we can give you an option. The option to give you 401k match or student loan repayment. So creating a very individualized compensation package for you. For people like us, it could be that you're in sandwich generation. You've got to take care of your parents, still paying off potentially student loans, and your kids are now enrolling in school. So you're set, the things that matter to you that will give us the stickiness to keep you with our organization is very different than a retiree. Bless you. The retiree may say, listen, I don't care about that kind of stuff. I'm getting my Social Security check. I can't make only this much money anyway. That's his problem. And the hell with you guys, you're not going to have Social Security anyway. So those are the things that we're trying. So very, very individualized. But let me tell you, everything that we do right now is designed around the 38-year-old to the 55-year-old. Let's just be honest. Because we know if those folks go away, or worse, quit and stay, so they become disengaged, America has a real problem. So don't believe all the hype millennials. You all are important because we know one day you're going to be us, but right now you're not. and we have to continue to thrive, right?
Absolutely, and you're right about that. The senior management C-suites of companies are going to increasingly be made up of Gen X.
What we are struggling with, and this is a real problem for our generation, is because people are remaining in the workplace for a longer period of time, that person who was going to retire at 65 has announced they're not leaving until 75. So you're 45, and now you've got 20 more years before you're going to make it into that C-suite. Meanwhile, the millennials are chipping and chirping, and they want the next promotion too. So we have a real compression problem. That's a term that we use. Salary compression, title compression, where everybody wants to they want to be upwardly mobile and progress. And I can't give the millennial the promotion because you are still in line waiting for your promotion, and the person who would have been retiring at 65 is now going to work till 72.
So then we get title inflation.
Title inflation.
Which is a very real thing.
There's a senior executive vice president.
Yes.
Not just an EVP. And we're giving all.
Everybody gets something.
Everybody. Title fair just comes in, and we're dealing through that. That's right. But it's a real, we are struggling with 5 generations in the workplace like nothing you've ever seen. It is a mighty problem.
It is.
It's an opportunity as well.
We've got a question up here.
Yeah, for either of you. Thank you for both of you. The situation with let's take a small startup with a half dozen people. They're all really passionate. They founded the company, and then you go through your growth phase.
Yes.
And often startups, there's so much trust and social capital so important that often it's not necessarily the most diverse handful of people, but in that first growth phase, how do you balance maintaining culture with as you were talking about inclusion of diversity? How do you hold that balance?
Well,
go ahead.
Okay, so I can tell you, you typically don't have it. As human beings, we naturally gravitate to people who are like us. News alert. And that's just not limited to white folks, it's everybody, right? You gravitate to people with whom you have something in common. It's sort of our human reality, right? And so what happens if I were to go out this happens to me, people will call me, and I'm gonna say this, they'll call me and say, hey, do you know a lawyer? X law firm or company is looking for a general counsel. Because most of the lawyers I know, not exclusively, but most of them are African-American lawyers, I naturally just deliver up one of those names. If I were to start a business tomorrow, I begin going to the people who I know, right? I'm not some racist, I didn't consciously think of doing that, but that's the way it happens. So to answer your question, you have to be very deliberate as you grow. You have to say, listen, that was okay when there were 5 of us.
That's right.
There is value in that. There was, because by the way, you can move very quickly when we're all thinking alike. We may not be making the best decisions, but we can move quickly because diversity typically slows things down. There's gonna be a naysayer in the room, someone who sees the world differently, and by the way, that's their value, but at the time, it's gonna slow you down. So when I was at a startup, and we all, I intentionally, because I came out of HR before I became the CEO of a startup. And it was a startup within a Fortune 500 company, by the way. So I had all of I wasn't in my garage. I don't do that kind of stuff, right? People say, oh, I didn't take a salary. Not me. But what happened is we started, and I was very intentional about having diversity in my group. And I gotta tell you, it slowed us down a little. We were beaten to market, frankly, by smaller groups who all thought alike and were singularly focused on what they were doing. Yeah. Fast forward, so they got ahead, but then they started to crater because they lacked the diversity, right? So then I had to migrate as we grew into a larger company. I mean, those organizations realized if they were gonna be successful, they had to diversify themselves, and that takes an intentionality, right?
The key words there were deliberate as you grow. It's fine, it makes sense, right? You get together with a group of, colleagues or friends or what have you. You have ideas, you build the company, and you start going. But then every new person you need to hire is a choice you're making. Right. And so I'll tell you today, my choice, where I'm deliberate is, I will not approve a hire unless there's been a diverse slate of finalists. Not just a diverse slate because we happen to have 100 names on a sheet of paper and some of them were diverse. But amongst our finalists, we have to have a diverse slate. That's a deliberate, that's an intention. And so as you grow, every job you hire for is a choice that you're making, and you have those opportunities, and so you have to be very focused on the fact that every one of those is an opportunity, because I promise you, if you don't get to the diversity, you absolutely will not grow. It's the sort of the hare and the turtle, or whatever the fable is.
That person.
Hey, thank you. Of course. Can we get you a mic?
This is a very sore point.
Oh, there's
a sore point.
Perfect, thank you.
This is a real point, and one that I struggle with all the time, because I'm still fleet of foot and quick of mind. Do you consider age as diversity? Do you have a person who is senior, uber senior, if they've got the ability?
We have many.
Are you afraid they're going to die?
Listen, it's a fair question.
I mean, let's face it, I'm past my due date.
Well, that means it wasn't your due date, right? No, but seriously, we laugh about it, but I alluded to that in the beginning. Ageism is real in America.
It is.
And it's something that all of us, we proudly talk about, and we actually brag. When you go to a career fair and everyone's looking for young, bright, energetic millennials, that's code for ageism. And there's nothing more frustrating. I shared with my colleagues, I rode in the other night with a guy who was a very successful salesperson, became expensive, became 55, and became unemployed. And he was now my Uber driver. And he could not get back into the workplace. So we have to be as deliberate as we are about gender, about race, about national origin. We have to be deliberate about bringing older workers back into the fold, because work gives you dignity, it gives you purpose. And so it is simply not a good thing, no matter how old someone is, if they want to work, are willing to work, creative, adaptable, agile. Listen, young people die. So you can't worry about when someone's gonna die. Their numbers will be what their numbers are, right? So you've gotta really, and it takes a deliver. I tell you, I just hired a 62-year-old. And literally, I was amazed at the number of people who asked me, this is at SHRM, well, what's his runway? I said, what do you mean? My grandfather lived to 103, so he got a hell of it. May have more than you. That's the reality, but we have to all deal with these biases that we have. We think unconscious biases are sort of race-based and gender-based, and they are much deeper than that, and age is one that few of us are willing to confront.
And I will tell you, I'm in an industry that's been under so much disruption and so much change over the last decade, and it has been wonderful to see that some of our most adaptable, and perhaps this goes back to the curiosity and the problem solving, have been our older workers, our older journalists, some of the greatest transformation that's happened in the company is not the sexy kind on the front lines of media, but back in our print operations, our printing facilities. And it's some of our oldest workers who have completely transformed how we work there and driving efficiencies in the business. And it's because they have the expertise, they have the institutional knowledge that they can bring to the new problems to solve. And it's incredibly valuable. So I completely agree.
Now, I will say this, though, let me tell you, it is also incumbent upon older workers to adapt. That's where we struggle a little bit on adaptability. So, if the new computer language, my mother is an older American, and she's a nurse. And let me tell you guys, she absolutely hated the day that they started making her take her medical records on an iPad. And I was like, listen, either do it, and we'll teach you how to do it. I'll send you to a class, all that good stuff. But if you're not going to do it, they need to get rid of you. And it's not ageism. The reality is technology has now come into healthcare. They're trying to have better medical records, more contemporaneously written notes, et cetera. And so you've got to get with it. So you have to be equally receptive to the new way of business if business is going to receive you. And that's tough.
Absolutely. We've got a question right here.
Yeah, I'm a lot older than this guy. I graduated in 1963.
Oh, God, he's just a kid.
He's a kid. And I hired a 53-year-old woman this morning, so I'm feeling good about what you said.
That's right.
So a couple things. Number one, does the corporate culture start at the CEO? That's the first. I'll just leave it there.
Yep.
Number two, I want to talk about millennials. We have 160 storefronts that we represent across the United States, retail.
Yes.
The average age of the salesperson is 55 years old.
Wow.
When they bring in a millennial and say, we're open at night, we're open, actually we sell retail on Saturday and Sunday, and my God, you're not going to believe it. We have a Memorial Day sale, a July 4th sale, and you're there on all those days. And they say, thank you very much, and they leave.
Yes.
We're unable to hire millennials for retail floor jobs, I can tell you that.
Yes.
Third thing is on myself. Story, sorry.
No, please.
So we're hiring a writer-producer. A Afro-American lady comes in, she's dressed in a beautiful black dress, she has heels, the pocketbook, she's made up right, she checks all the boxes, and she's now in front of me with a tattoo on her shoulder and a piece in her nose. And she's fantastic. And I'm old.
Oh, this is
So
great.
what happened here is a female vice president, and we're a small company,
Yes.
came in and said, get over it. Hire her. She is fantastic. She's been with us now for 3 years. She's great. So I do think there's problems with people my age. I have young partners who say we got to be younger, and we're looking for a younger writer-producer, and today we hired a woman who's 53. She's not exactly young. The other problem is a company like ours, when people have been with us 20 years and they go through pay raises,
Yes.
they get above what I see the cap. We have tons, not tons, we're a small company, don't get me wrong, but we have people that have become 65, 68, 170-year-old retiring, who are way above what the salary is for that position. So back up, millennials, CEO sets the tone, and I'm learning. That's it.
Hey, listen, he should have been up here. Way to go. I do want to react to this because this comes up often with CEOs, and this is a really important point. Organizations not only have cultures. There are more conservative cultures and less conservative cultures, and that conservatism may manifest itself in dress. I came from a law firm, a big law firm, and there was a way that you were expected to dress, and you've got to decide, do you want to work here or not? It was a good thing that you made that decision, but a number of companies would absolutely go the other way. And so what we tell young people, middle-aged people, older people is know where you're going to interview, and frankly, remove anything that will be a distraction, okay? So the piercing, I'll tell you, I just went through this. Young guy came in, my staff will tell you, I'm on video, it's true, I'm transparent, brilliant. Just finished his MBA from UVA, and he comes in to work with us. Second day, he comes into my office for a meeting with the CEO with an earring in his ear. By the way, guys, I'm so damn distracted by this big earring in his ear until I can't even focus on what he's saying, because I really can't. Call me old, call me what you want, but call me CEO. Okay? So I make the decisions. And I politely called up Christopher, one of his contemporaries, and I said, you tell him he can wear the earrings whenever he wants, but not in my office. And clearly not in a meeting where he's representing us. Full stop. Now, this young man has decisions to make. I don't have a decision to make, because there are 25 other people looking for that same job, that six-figure job that I just paid him. So he's got to decide whether or not he's going to work at SHRM or not. And if the response is, well, at Apple they let you do it, I said, well, then go apply to work at Apple. This isn't Apple. It goes back to being clear about what your culture is. It's good that you were willing to make that adjustment. But young people, middle-aged people, that's why I struggle with that come as you are literally, because this can go pretty far. You know, people come as they are. And she laughs. So I would just say he made a very good decision for his culture. There are other cultures where walking in that door in Wall Street with an nose ring, I guess it wouldn't be an ear rose, it's a nose ring, and tattoos showing. By the way, hide the tattoo. Christopher has tattoos.
She's never worn ear, whatever you call it, and she's never had on something that didn't have sleeves.
Right. So
Yeah,
again,
there you go.
I don't want to belabor that point, but to say that you have to think about, we are making these decisions.
Look, it shows up not just in what you wear. I mean, I work in a profession where your public persona is really important. We in journalism have to stay within bounds from a objectivity perspective and so on and so forth. And one of the challenges that we often have, especially in the era of social media, is journalists who might post things on social media that would potentially tarnish, or call suspect their objectivity in certain coverage. We have policies against that. It's no different than in the old days when I was in J school and they used to say to us, well, you can't put a political sign in your front yard. Well, social media is that today. And so I love our chief legal officer. She always says, quite sweetly, she's wonderful New Orleans gal, and she will tell you with a smile on her face, you have a right to self-expression, you don't have a right to a job. And so you have to, in every workplace, you're going to have certain guardrails, and then it's up to you what makes sense for you. You have choices. I believe we have a few hands, and I'm being asked to bring us down. So this is the last question. Okay, Erica has put the kibosh on the question. So this is the last question.
I'm curious to know how you would distinguish between adaptability and being agile, because there are overlaps between them.
I would get someone from the NIH to ask me a scientifically based question. Hell, I struggle with spelling the difference. They both start with A and end with entity. But so in our research would suggest that adaptability actually speaks to, almost as it would suggest, your ability and willingness to change as is necessary for the circumstance. Agility is changing, but it kind of involves a little bit of celerity and speed. So one is, and they're not, you're right, there is absolutely, if you're doing the concentric circles, there'd be something in the middle that is overlap, but the reality is when we speak to agility, what we're getting to is speed. The world moves so fast, especially in journalism and frankly in everything these days, until you've got to be adaptable and you've got to do it quickly. So the idea that someone says, I'm going to adapt, but it's going to take me 6 months to get there, means you're not agile. And there's also a more, the technologists have a real definition of agile, that they talk about agile learning, agile, the way that they process
methodology,
things.
yeah.
Right, methodology. That's a different thing. So when we're talking layperson's agility, it's largely, yes, you've got to shift and be willing to change, but you got to do it quickly.
Great. Well, I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight and for all of your great questions and participation. And I saw a few other hands go up hoping to get a question in. So we'll be around for a few minutes if anyone wants to catch us just after. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you.